paper that I've just written that addresses some of these challenges, and I think many of the legitimate concerns that Doug has raised can be met by actions by the Congress and the administration, and I do not think that the wage agreements that were reached late last year are sufficient to resolve the competitiveness problems of the U.S. firms. I think they help quite a bit going forward, but if one proposal I think bears consideration is the institution of temporary refundable investment tax credits to help the older plants tool up to the same level of the new plants that are being built by companies in other regions of the United States. That would help short term. It would help provide the incentive to invest, and would begin to redress the problem of the drain on employment. I disagree with Claude. We need an auto industry. We have a competitive segment of the auto industry in the United States. It's important. I think the government is up in over its eyeballs already by the way it handles tax and expenditure policies. And so it has created the incentives and also created the distortions that have resulted in the problems that we see today. And it's not all the government's fault. The firms have made a lot of big mistakes. The unions have made a lot of big mistakes. But those have been, but there has been a long-standing process to redress those mistakes over the past decade or more. So I think we have to take a more balanced perspective on that. But in conclusion, what I find odd is that the KORUS FTA should be the focal point for the blame for a lot of these problems. The agreement, whether it is implemented or not, is not going to have a great impact on the competitiveness of U.S. automakers. It will have tremendous benefits for bilateral Korea-U.S. trade. It will have tremendous benefits for our bilateral political relationship, and the adjustment burdens that we face in our country should be met primarily by American policy reforms, just as the adjustment burdens that Korea will have to face in many segments of its economy, including agriculture, are going to have to be addressed by changes in Korea policy and new adjustment measures introduced by and paid for by the Korean government. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff. We're going to open this up for about 15 minutes. I'm going to say the last 5 minutes for Dr. Nam, so he can make some concluding remarks. And obviously we've had really 5 very interesting presentations today, but we now at this point you can focus in on those questions that are of most interest to you, and you're welcome to guide your questions to any of our panelists.
Yeah, my question is to the representative of Mr. Meyer from the UAW. Just 2 brief questions. Was the UAW opposed to USTR negotiating the KORUS in the first place? In other words, before it even started. And second, once it started, did the UAW talk to USTR about it?
Well, I answer your first question, being relatively new to the UAW, I'm not entirely clear on its past official positions on the negotiations. I think it is safe to say that we were skeptical about entering into those negotiations. I think we, the UAW, along with other unions and the AFL-CIO, do sit on the Labor Advisory Committee at USTR and have routine ability to consult and advise and recommend to the USTR in the negotiations of trade agreements and other trade relationships. I think it is safe to say that my esteemed predecessor exercised that opportunity to share our voices and our concerns. But I think the real answer to your question is, which hasn't come up today, which is what would we like to see in any agreement with Korea. And I think in some, it's not our proposal, but it was the Democratic members of Congress proposed auto proposal about establishing the parameters and in effect tying reductions in tariffs to demonstrable or measurable results in opening up the Korea auto market.
My question is to Mr. Meyer also. Thank you for your interesting presentation and turning up the heat. Having listened very keenly to your presentation, I'd like to understand better if you could identify and elaborate the non-tariff barriers other than the possible cultural preference Koreans might have for small cars because of tight parking places. Other than that one, could you identify the non-tariff barriers for us?
I'd be happy to. I think there are many, but having said that, I also think they're changing and almost by definition, they're a moving target, which makes it extremely difficult for any negotiator, for any country, to adequately address their introduction and implementation. Historically, as Professor Nam, I believe, mentioned, there was the discriminatory tax structure on autos in Korea that has, in effect, been simplified but not eliminated. So we would continue to argue that that tax system, which essentially discriminates against higher or larger automobiles, is one non-tariff barrier. It has been addressed, but it's not addressed to our total satisfaction. It still exists, and there still are taxes discriminating on engine size. That's one. There are a whole host of technical standards, safety standards, environmental standards that have been used in the past by Korean.
Could you identify some of those?
Perhaps my colleagues from the auto companies could be more specific than I would be able to, but in the abstract, there's different model or production standards, shapes of the fender, shapes of the license plate. Was one that has traditionally been cited is that Korea would change the regulations about where and what shapes the license plate on the car would be, therefore necessitating a revamping of the design of U.S.-based automobiles as a method to discourage imports. I think there is clear evidence that the practice of the Korean government was that to access the records of those people, Korean consumers that purchased U.S. automobiles, that their taxes would be audited. We would consider that to be not only a non-tariff barrier, but certainly would go far to discriminating or discouraging consumer perceptions of buying U.S.-made automobiles. So those are a couple of...
All right, Doug, thanks very much.
Okay.
Bernard wants to add a point on this subject, and then go ahead.
Okay. I'll try to make this quite brief. One item that we have not really discussed, but I think I might not fully serve my role if I didn't point out, is in terms of non-trade barriers. We have independently of this conversation and independently of the whole process, really removed perhaps the biggest non-trade barrier of them all for the U.S. market, which is the changing preferences of the U.S. consumer. If we had this conversation in 1998 instead of 2008, it would be entirely different. At that time, the U.S. consumer had a taste for large vehicles, heavy vehicles, that really no one else in the world was very good at making. And so if you were a Korean company, or if you were a Chinese company, if you were a European company, if you were looking domestically at, we have this capacity, we have this expertise, can